Don't shoot your eye out, kid. Alright guys, this week we're going over the PSA Dagger. We have a lot to cover this week. It's going to be a long one. So go ahead and scroll through if you need to find what you're looking for. So we're going to be doing a full assembly of this weapon. We'll start off with the tools and equipment. We'll do the full assembly and we'll talk about some of the sub-assemblies. We'll do a functions check. We'll do a cycle of operations. We'll do a dry fire for our cycle of operations, and we'll do a dummy round fire for our cycle of operations. We're also going to do the barrel length. We'll do the headspace. We're going to do the differences between twist rates and other different types of pistols. We're going to get a trigger weight for this weapon. And as always, we'll be closing with our references. Since we're working with weapons, we have our iPro on. We have no ammo in our workspace. And we have clear weapons that we clear multiple times. So we'll see you in a minute. Alright guys, I'm doing something a little different this week. I'm going to list the tools after the fact. That way we have all our tools in here and I don't have to edit them in. So, of course, we use our iPro, which is number one. And we'll just go ahead and we'll go this way. We use several magnetic bands. We use bench blocks. We use several pliers in this application. We use both hammers. Actually, we used 8-ounce, and I use both sides of this hammer here. I use several different punches here. I use brass and steel for different applications. You'll see those in the video. These are two of the tools that we got as well. We have the front sight tool, and we have the striker sleeve tool. Use this grabber tool just for some things. You will need a marking utensil. We also use our dummy rounds, and we use our go and no-go gauge. And then here over on some of our measurement tools, I actually prefer to use the little silver metal one we had, but this one shows up better on the camera. We also use our calipers. We used our clearing/cleaning rod, and we used a calculator. So if you have any questions about the tools, just post them below or let me know however way it's easy for you. All right, guys, here we're going to work on our first sub-assembly, which is the trigger assembly. And our first step is going to be to take our trigger safety and to put it into our trigger shoe. You can see there's a little spring on the trigger safety. We're just going to drive a roll pin into the hole there. I'm just going to use this 3 and 30 seconds just to make sure we're flush here. Okay, you can see that she's working. Right now that we have this set, we're going to go ahead and take our trigger bar here and we're going to set it into the back end of the shoe like so. As you can see, all of our components are facing up. Okay, so it's going to be facing like this. I'm going to pre-drive a roll pin right into here, and that way it's easier for me to get this on that as a leg. And I'll try to do it without going too far. All right, should be set in there good, and then now I'm going to go ahead and set our trigger bar here. It goes into the back on this side, the larger the slots. All right, and we have our trigger bar on there. I'm going to go ahead and set it flush. And if you can see that pin that's still on the pan, that is going to be put on later once we get to the frame. Okay, and that is our trigger assembly assembled. All right, guys, our next sub-assembly is the striker assembly. We have our striker, we have our spacer sleeve, we have our striker spring, and our cups. There's not really any tools in this one except your iPro. You really need your iPro because we're going to be working with spring tension. So all you're doing is you're taking your striker and you're making sure it fits into the spacer sleeve here. Like so. No issues. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put our cups on here. All right, and that is your striker spring assembly.
All right, next all we're doing is we're taking the slide cover plate here and the insert, and we are inserting the insert into our slide cover plate. Actually, I can set it all the way in there mostly. And I'm just going to tap it on the end here just to make sure we're flush. And that is our slide cover plate. All right, next we're going to be taking the slide and inserting our striker channel sleeve. We do need our hammer for this, and we also need a channel liner kit that we got from SDI. And this is polymer. All we're going to do is place our striker channel sleeve here into the back of our slide. And we're going to take our channel liner kit and insert it into here. Make sure you guys can see this. So it just goes in like this. And I'm just going to use the neoprene side or the soft side of our hammer here to set this in. And it just stops when it's done. Yeah, I did it that way so you guys could see it, but you can definitely feel once it's set at the end. Now we have our striker channel sleeve set. All right, next is our trigger mechanism housing and our ejector. This here is the trigger mechanism housing, and this is the ejector. And all it does is the ejector fits into the housing here on this back side, and it's a tight fit. I'm going to set it as much as I can by hand, and then we're going to take the soft side of our hammer here and set it. All right, and as far as she goes, and our trigger mechanism assembly put together. All right, next we're going to put the connector into the trigger housing assembly, which is simple. All you have to do is just line it up right and push it in. All right, next we're going to be setting the front sight post. We have the front sight here and the front sight screw. You'll need a tool to do it, so you'll need a front sight tool here. And of course, we need the slide to set it in. All right, so all we're doing is we're setting the front sight with the dot towards the rear. All right. All right, now I'm going to take the front sight screw here and I'm going to set it into our front sight tool. Okay, and all this tool does is let us get down in here so we can set our front sight. All right, and we have our front sight set. All right, guys, here we're going to be setting the rear sight. So we have our rear sight here and our rear sight screw. I'm using the hammer. This is a 1/16 Allen wrench here for our set screw. We'll be using this to hammer in the rear sight. Here into the frame is where it's going, and then after we get it set, we're going to be measuring with calipers to make sure we're centered. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and set our rear sight. We are going to be speeding this up. We just want to make sure we can get it as much of the way in before we start to hammer, and that we use a brass or aluminum punch to get it in there. All right, looks about set, guys. Let's go ahead and take a measurement with our calipers here. And all I'm doing is just, as you can see, it has basically a little ruler here, so I'm just making sure it's centered when I put it on here. Okay, so yeah, that's good to go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set our rear sight set screw, and this is a 1/16 Allen wrench here. What I am going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and you can see where I did a bad hammering job and I hit the top here. So we're going to go ahead and re-blue this here, and we'll be back. All right, our next sub-assembly is the extractor assembly. We're not going to be using the actual extractor itself, which is this piece here, but we will be putting together this other part here. So we're taking the extractor depressor plunger here, And then we are taking our spring and we're just going to set it on this leg here, a little bit of force. All right, and then we're just going to take the spring-loaded bearing here and set it into the other end. And it has just got a little bit of force. Okay, and we have our extractor assembly set together, and we'll put it together in the frame later. All right, next we're going to do our recoil assembly. And all we're going to do is take our guide rod here and our recoil spring, and we're going to use finger tension to tighten this down. Definitely use your iPro. And we're going to take the guide rod cap screw here and put it on as soon as we get enough tension to get it on there. I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten it down, and that is our recoil assembly. All right, here we're going to put in the magazine catch and spring. Here is this spring here, and here is the magazine catch. So first we'll put the spring in and try to orient it so you can see it a little better. So you can see the slot down in there. That's where the magazine catch spring goes. Okay, and I'll show you in a second. And it's not that hard to put in. We just gotta make sure we set it in there. As you can see what I mean. I'm just gonna make sure it's set better. Use a punch just to make sure it's set nice and tight. Okay, not too much. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our magazine catch, and it's going in this way, so long way to the left, long left. If that helps you remember, that's gonna help me remember anyway. So as you see, once it comes through, it's gonna hit this spring. So we're just gonna pry this spring up to get it behind there. All right, so you see it's coming in, then goes across, and you see that little notch that just set in the end? Right as it comes in, you'll see this notch coming in. It's towards the left. Okay. So we're going to set this, and that's where we're going to take a screwdriver, and we're going to push this spring over to make sure it catches in that latch there. Okay, and we got her set in there. Let's just make sure she works real quick. Pretty tight. All right, so let's go ahead and set our slide lock and spring, these two pieces here. If you notice, there's a little bevel on this end here, and this is going to be facing rearward. Okay, so it's going to be facing rearward towards you as you're shooting. Okay, so make sure you do that because there is a wrong way to put it in. Okay, but first we're going to go ahead and take our spring here. You can go into that housing right up there. Okay. All right, so once we got our set in here, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set our slide lock here. Just get it preset because I'm going to be pushing on one side while I push down on the spring here. That's one of those. These are one of those pieces where you need to have your eye pro. Okay, and then we have her set in there. Check to make sure she works here. Yeah, so she's sliding down. So you're set correctly. All right, next we're going to be putting together our fire control group. So we have our trigger housing assembly here, and our trigger spring here, and our trigger assembly here. So first we're going to take our trigger spring, and we're going to put it into an S configuration just to make it easier to remember. We're going to loop this spring back through that hole in the back here. All right, just make sure. We'll bring it up here, and then what we're going to do is go ahead and hook it onto our trigger assembly. You can see there's a hole in the back of the trigger assembly here, and that's where that spring is going to go into. And all right, now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and set our spring back down here, and then put that trigger assembly into the trigger housing. All right, and we just want to make sure that everything is centered in the middle down here. Just making sure everything is set in here correctly. And we have our fire control group set. All right, we're going to go ahead and install our fire control group, our slide stop, our locking block, our trigger pin and our other roll pins. Okay, so first we're going to take our trigger assembly and set her right down in here. Right, she sets in like that. Next, we're going to take our slide stop, and she's going to sit in here like this. All right, so let's go ahead and set our locking block in place here. And then we're going to put our pin in here. Okay, and she slides in like that. And then let's go ahead and we are going to, next we're going to set our pins. Remember the small pin towards the rear and the long pin towards the front. Let's go ahead and set this front pin first here. Okay, I mentioned the longer one, the 2. And I'm just going to make sure she's flush. Okay, and then we have that set. Now let's go ahead and put our rear pin in. Alright, I'm just going to make sure she's set. Alright, and this one is set. We are good to go. One thing I wanted to note about the slide stop lever and spring. Okay, once we have our locking block in, that slide stop spring is going to come through. You want to make sure it is protruding here on the left-hand side of the pistol rather than over here on the right. Otherwise, you might have issues with your slide stop riding up. All right, we're going to go ahead and put our slide together here. First, we're going to take our slide and then our striker safety and spring and set her right down in there. I'm just going to push down. You can see the extractor is a little circular end on that end. So that end is going into towards the rear of the slide. Okay, then she's set. And then next we're going to take our striker assembly here. And it's easy, it only goes in one way. Okay. Go ahead and push her down in there. All right, and then we're going to take our extractor assembly here, and it is metal in. That metal rod goes in. Okay, now we're going to get our slide cover here and just get her set in place. And let's see if I can push that down. Okay, here. I'll grab my punch here just to. These are one of those pieces you guys got to wear your eye pro on because we're going to spring tension. Okay, then you hear that snap, and that means it's in there. All right, so let's go ahead and assemble our main components. Okay, we are clear, of course. So first we're going to set our barrel in here. Box right in there, and then we're going to take our recoil spring and set a recoil spring. I'm going to wrap my thumb around it just to make sure I'm holding on to that spring. Slide onto our frame here. Okay. And there we go, she's assembled. And when we come back, we'll do a functions check. All right, now that we're fully assembled, we're going to go ahead and do a functions check. But first, we're going to make sure everything's clear. So let's go ahead and check inside our weapon here. I want you to make sure it's clear, and I am also going to physically check to make sure it's clear, as well as visual. And also our magazine here. Make sure our magazine's clear. And then as you can see, we have the dummy rounds over here. We'll be using those for a portion of the functions check as well. And then we'll be doing cycle of operations. So our first functions check here, we're just going to do it dry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let the slide go forward. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the safety here works. I'm going to push on the trigger shoe itself here, and make sure that the trigger does not go beyond the frame here. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull on the trigger where the trigger safety is, and we'll see if it fires, which it should. And she fires. I'm going to keep my finger on the trigger here, and I'm going to rack it back, and we're going to check our reset. Okay, click as you heard, and let's go ahead and see if she fires. And she fires, so let's go ahead and try that again. So next we're going to go ahead and put our magazine in here. And one function check is to make sure that when we rack this back to the rear, that it stays to the rear. So as you can see, she stayed to the rear. And let's just double check that she's clear, guys. So she's clear. And I'm going to let this go forward. And we're going to try it again. Let's try this. Trigger shoot. And now let's try to shoot it. Okay, let's try it back. And she stays back. And let's go ahead. I'm going to keep the trigger back here. And let's try before. Let's try reset. Click. And click. Okay, that's exactly what we want. So rack it back to the rear and eject our magazine. And then I'll load this magazine up and we'll do a dummy dry fire check. All right, guys, so we're going to do our dummy ammo functions check. Here you can see our weapon's clear, of course. And then we have our dummy ammunition. We'll go ahead and let the slide go forward. And then load our magazine. Essentially, we're going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to be checking a little bit of the head spacing up here, making sure it's set right back here. And we're going to go ahead and make sure all these rounds chamber and check the trigger. So let's go ahead and see if this one fires. Let's go ahead and chamber it back. Okay. And let's make sure, check the trigger shoe. Okay, so trigger shoe's still working. And let's go ahead and fire. Okay, now let's see if we eject. And we ejected. And let's go ahead and let it go forward. And I still have the trigger to the rear. I'm gonna check it. We're forward. Okay, check that trigger shoe again. Okay, now let's pull it back. Okay, you can see that once the magazine is clear, that the slide locks to the rear. So this weapon has performed in the dummy operation as well. Next, we're going to do the cycle of operations. All right, so let's go ahead and go through the cycle of operations for this PSA Dagger. As you know, we have a clear weapon. As you can see, it's clear, and I will physically check. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to load 2 of these dummy rounds into the magazine just to go through the cycle of operations with you. All right, so we're going to feed the magazine here. As you guys know, the 8 cycle of operations or rifling functions, as you might know them: feeding, chambering, locking, firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and cocking. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go through that with this here. So we have our magazine in, so we are fed. Now let's go ahead and chamber our first round. Okay, you can see the first round's going in. Okay, so now it is locked. It is also locked here. So let's go ahead and fire. All right, so as we fire, if we were firing live ammunition, we'd fire and it would blow back the slide here. And while it's doing that, it's going to unlock and it's going to extract that round with the extractor, which is here. Okay, it's extracting that round. It's going to eject that round, and then it's going to reload a new round, and then that's cocked again. So there's your cycle of operations for the PSA Dagger. All right, so let's go ahead and remove this magazine and our last dummy round here. And when we come back, we'll be doing the barrel length for this pistol. All right, let's go ahead and get this barrel length first. We're going to clear this weapon. You guys can see it's clear here. And I'm just going to physically check it as well. And we have a clearing rod, so you guys will definitely see that as clear. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and let our slide go forward. All right, and this one is pretty simple. We have a breech closed, and we're just going to go ahead and hit the back and make our mark here. Okay, and when we come back, we will measure our barrel length. All right, let's go ahead and check this barrel length now. You can see we have our mark here. This is our entry point, and here is our mark here. So that is right around 3.9 inches, which is exactly what the manual says is 3.9 inches. So our barrel length is fine. All right, guys, we're going to be talking about the differences in twist rate and why you might see different twist rates in different types of weapons. So, for example, here we have this Taurus 856, which has a twist rate of 1 in 16.5. And then we have our PSA Dagger here, which has a twist rate of 1 in 10, as opposed to something like an M4 that has a twist rate of 1 in 7. So you can see the numbers are going down. So essentially, the lower the number, the faster that round is spinning inside that barrel, so it can reach out and touch someone essentially. So with your smaller barrel, like the 856 here, it doesn't have to go that far. It's a snub nose, so you're shooting close distance. But the PSA Dagger might give you a little more distance. But those are the differences. So essentially, the higher the one and is, the slower that round is moving through the barrel or twisting through the barrel. So in something like a small pistol, you don't have to fire as far, whereas a long gun you have to fire further. So the twist rate is different. So that's the differences between the twist rates. When we come back from here, we will be doing the headspace for the PSA Dagger. All right, so let's go ahead and do our headspace. We have our headspace gauges here. We have our go and our no-go, and we'll be using the go first. And it's a little different from the revolver. We have our slide separated here, and we have our barrel separated here. What we're going to do is take our go gauge and place it into the barrel. And then we are going to reset the barrel here. And as you can see, it has to clear where the extractor is coming through. Okay, so if we look on top, you can see that it's set just fine, and that barrel sits in there just fine. So now we'll go ahead and take this out, and we'll try our no-go gauge. And this one should not fit. Okay, and as you can see on this side, it is not flush, this is what we want. We don't want our no-go gauge to fit. So that's how you do the headspace on the PSA Dagger with your go and no-go gauges. And when we come back, we'll be doing the trigger pull weight for this PSA Dagger. All right, guys, here we're going to get some trigger weights, but first we're going to make sure it's clear, as always. You can see our magazine's clear, so there's no magazine in here. And then let's go ahead and use this clearing rod here, and you'll see it come through. Okay, so that is clear. And then let's go ahead and let this go forward. And let's get our first trigger weight here. 5.5. 5.5. All right, and that is 5.5. So we will call our trigger weight 5.5 pounds. All right, guys, this concludes this video. We went over quite a bit today. If you need to go through and scroll through, or if you have any questions, let me know. So let's go ahead and talk about our references this week. We used the Gun Digest Automatic Pistols Assembly, Disassembly 7th edition. We used our SDI FTH 212 Mechanics and Firearms, Striker Fire Pistols, and also the previous courses. We also use Gun Digest Book of Exploded Gun Drawings, 4th edition. We use the PSA Dagger Manual. And lastly, we use Gunsmithing Pistols and Revolvers, 4th edition. If you have any questions, leave them below. And as always, stay frosty.